A very good evening to you. This is Wednesday night's calendar.
Yes, good evening and welcome to the programme on the day that, after weeks of speculation, the Home Office announced it will house hundreds of migrants in a disused military base in Lincolnshire. On tonight's programme. This is not the end. Families living on the edge of the former RAF Scampton site say they'll fight on for however long it takes to halt the government's plan.
We want to know how we're going to be protected and looked after if they decide to put 1,500 people here.
I'm scared because we've now got a 7-year-old as well, and then the grandchildren visit. They're not going to be able to play out. I'll be absolutely petrified of anything happening to them.
This is a plan that's going to be inhumane for those who live here, and it's going to put pressure on local services which are already absolutely on their knees.
And it's not just local residents preparing for battle. West Lindsey District Council says it's heading to the courts to take on the government. Join me for the full story later on.
We'll have more reaction from Scampton, plus the political fallout from Westminster shortly. But first, to the anger of residents living around RAF Scampton in Lincolnshire after the government confirmed its plans to house hundreds of asylum seekers at the former military base. In Parliament, Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick said the plan was vital to ease the pressure on communities where migrants are currently staying in hotels. It's a situation, he said, which is costing the government millions of pounds every day. But many people living near RAF Scampton think it's simply not the right place and say their voices are being ignored. Well, Emma Wilkinson is there for us tonight. Emma, emotions were running high today there.
Yes, this announcement was expected, but still to hear it confirmed in Parliament was hugely disappointing for many. Recently there was a public meeting about these plans. There was a huge turnout and a lot of opposition, and that opposition centres around a number of different issues. First of all, the fact that this place was earmarked for a huge redevelopment project that many people think will now be scuppered. People are worried about safety, about strain on local infrastructure, and the fact that this is an historic site that many people think needs to be preserved. And nowhere is the strength of feeling greater than in this community here, which is right next to the base.
So you can see how close it is.
From her kitchen, Sarah looks over the runway at RAF Scampton. For years, the red arrows taxied past her window. What the coming years might look like is playing on her mind all the time.
So today the government is announcing the first tranche of sites.
Her fears were only heightened today as she listened to the government announce its plans to use the base and others elsewhere in the country to house people seeking asylum.
These will be scaled up over the coming months and will collectively provide accommodation to several thousand asylum seekers.
I can inform him that the moment this is confirmed, the local authority of West Lindsey will issue an immediate judicial review and injunction against this thoroughly bad decision.
Sarah has a long list of reasons for why she too thinks this is a bad decision, and safety is right up there.
And we're well aware that it's a minority that cause those problems, but it's a potential they're still going to come on our doorstep, basically. So we want to know how we're going to be protected and looked after if they decide to put 1,500 people here.
Many residents who live in former military houses here are also asking that question. They are dismayed at the plans and the lack of communication they've had from the government.
We've had nothing. No one's come up and spoke to residents, no one's knocked on the doors, so it's just a whirlwind for us. It's not fair.
The school is really close to the fence. They're going to have real needs if they truly are fleeing war zones. Where are they going to get the support? What are they going to do all day? They'll be bored, they'll be frustrated.
I'm scared because we've now got a 7-year-old as well, and then the grandchildren visit. They're not going to be able to play out. I'll be absolutely petrified of anything happening to them. And also, our house prices, we won't be able to give our houses away.
RAF Scampton and its rich history mean a lot to this community. It was the HQ of the Dam Busters, and until recently was the home of the famous Red Arrows. And many were excited that that heritage could be preserved thanks to a £300 million proposal to make this a centre for aviation history, research and tourism.
The benefit of that would be enormous, not just for here and not just for Lincoln, but it would be to the county and the country. And in a time when We hear levelling up, levelling up. It just beggars belief.
Also in disbelief today are refugee charities, after Robert Jenrick said the entire asylum system has to be suffused with deterrence. He said people who will be placed in repurposed barrack blocks and porter cabins should have their basic needs met and nothing more.
I think it's appalling that we've got a government that thinks that people are coming and fleeing to the UK for our housing and our accommodation, and not because they're actually seeking sanctuary and fleeing persecution.
This is not in any way a serious answer.
Hamish Falcon has started a petition against these plans that's now been signed by more than 50,000 people. He's Labour's parliamentary candidate for Lincoln, and at one time worked for the Foreign Office.
When the UK military, when the UK Foreign Office is in war zones, we would often live in shipping container-like accommodation. You'd usually call it living in podland. And if they try and turn this into podland, they're going to end up with carnage. This is a plan that's going to be inhumane for those who live here, and it's going to put pressure on local services which are already absolutely on their knees.
They will relieve pressure on our communities.
The government insists these plans are in the national interest. For Sarah, this community is being forgotten, but she says she won't let that happen.
Today's day one. It's just starting. Now the fight starts.
Well, certainly a hot topic. Let's go back live to Emma at Scampton now. And Emma, this wasn't the news people there wanted to hear, but they didn't get much detail about the plans today, did they?
No, there was some surprise actually at how general the announcement was. Robert Jenrick didn't even specifically mention RAF Scampton until he was asked about it. There was no detail about exactly how many people would be housed here, although it's thought to be around 1,500. No detail about timeframes or how long people would be housed here. We know there will be legal challenges, so this is likely to drag on, but there is huge resilience here to fight this as long as it takes.
Emma Wilkinson, live at Scampton, thank you.
And we'll certainly hear more from Scampton in the future. Our political correspondent Katie Oscroft has been assessing the fallout following the announcement in Westminster this lunchtime. What's the backlash been so far?
Well, the news here was greeted with fury, but it was also seen as inevitable. The feeling was that the government was going to press ahead, whatever the scale and persistence of the opposition, in spite of that multi-million-pound regeneration plan. I asked the MP for the area, Sir Edward Lee, whether this idea that Scampton could perhaps house asylum seekers for a year or so and then be redeveloped was a realistic one.
Well, is the migrant crisis going to be over within the next 18 months or 2 years? Can they keep the runway open, which was going to be guaranteed by Scampton Holdings? Can they preserve 100 buildings on the site, all of which were scheduled for redevelopment under the plan already agreed by the local council? So can they guarantee the safety of 1,000 people living on the married quarters right next door to a camp for illegal migrants, 1,500 of them? I'm not sure.
Is this likely to put a stop completely to the multi-million-pound plans?
We don't know. I mean, they may be right that they can give various reassurances that Scampton Holdings may be able to do something. I can't speculate on that. All I'm saying is it's not worth the risk.
Do you feel that the protest, the public meeting, all of that was pointless because the government had already decided?
Well, I think there has been an element of duplicity in this because I think the government has been determined for weeks to do this. I mean, I fear they won't be deterred by public meetings or anything like that. They will be deterred, I hope, by this judicial review, which will be based on sound and solid arguments, not arguments that we just don't like migrants, but arguments around the fact that this puts at risk a £300 million regeneration deal.
So Edward talks about that threat of legal action from West Lindsey Council. Katie, what are they saying to the government now?
Well, council officials say they've been working for years to secure this deal. They're inviting government ministers to leave here, go to the area, see the site and speak to them. And they've spent the afternoon with barristers discussing all the legal options with a view to stopping this asylum plan in its tracks.
Katie, live in Westminster, thank you.
We know that these plans are in the public interest and have the public backing. The government have come up with a very rapidly put together plan for this site that does not meet the emerging planning framework. It does not have public support. We believe we're bringing a huge levelling up opportunity to Lincolnshire, and we will continue to push that message to government.
Well, the last word on this goes to Scampton Holdings, the company which wanted to redevelop this site. The company says it's devastated by this decision taken here today and says it would welcome an approach from the Home Office to discuss their plans.
Katie, live in Westminster, thank you.